chandelier lights exploded in brilliance as if the heavens had opened right above the grand dining hall. The piano whispered its delicate notes, weaving an invisible spell that bound the guests into silence and awe. Men in black suits carried the air of Wall Street titans. Women in glittering gowns shimmered like a galaxy of stars. Every glass of champagne, every slice of silverware screamed power, wealth, and untouchable privilege. Yet, in the farthest corner, away from the spotlight, sat a woman who outshone them all without trying. Her name was Hana Sakamoto. The moment she entered, the atmosphere shifted like the sudden hush of a courtroom before a verdict. Whispers spread like wildfire across the tables. That is Hana, the Japanese mogul who built an empire in Tokyo. That is the millionaire who moves markets with a single word. But tonight, something was different. She did not arrive with bodyguards or translators. No entourage. No shield. Just Hana, her silver hair pinned neatly, her face carved with the weight of decades. Her simple kimono-style dress seemed almost defiant in the sea of excess. In her hand, she clutched a pendant as if it carried secrets the world could never know. Guests dared to steal glances. Some stared openly, unable to reconcile the image of unimaginable wealth wrapped in silence and stillness. The room buzzed with curiosity and a touch of discomfort. Why was she alone? What was she thinking? Why did her presence command more attention than all the gold in the room? The night had barely begun, yet everyone sensed it. Something was about to break. And when it did, the entire hall would never forget the woman who sat quietly in the shadows, holding the room hostage with nothing but her silence. Hana Sakamoto did not need gold to shine. She did not need diamonds to command attention. She entered the room wrapped in simplicity, and yet every glance was pulled toward her as if gravity itself had chosen her as its center. While others glittered with borrowed splendor, Hana radiated something far more powerful, something carved by time and earned through struggle. Her dress was not designed by the latest Parisian house. It was not a gown that begged for the cameras. It was a dark kimono-style piece, quiet and understated, yet regal in a way no Western designer could replicate. The fabric clung to her with the dignity of centuries, whispering of tradition and discipline. In a hall dripping with indulgence, she was a solitary flame of restraint. And that restraint became her crown. Her silver hair was not an accident of age, but a statement of survival. Each strand gleamed under the chandelier like polished steel, reminding everyone that beauty could be forged in endurance. She had lived decades of storms and victories, and her hair was a battlefield's testimony, where others sought to die away their years. Hana wore hers like a general wears medals. It was not vanity, it was defiance. Her face carried the weight of empires. Lines etched deep around her eyes and mouth did not soften her. They sharpened her presence. Every wrinkle was a story, every shadow a testament. The guests who stared at her could sense it. This was a woman who had stared down competitors, silenced boardrooms, and turned her vision into power that stretched across oceans. The hush that followed her entrance was not fear alone. It was recognition of authority. And then there was the pendant, a small piece of silver clasped tightly in her trembling hand. She held it close to her chest, her thumb rubbing across its surface again and again, as if drawing strength from its hidden memory. Nobody knew its origin, yet everyone noticed the intensity with which she clung to it. To some, it looked like desperation. To others, it looked like prayer. But to Hana, it was neither. It was a secret weapon, an anchor in a room where everything else was foreign. Around her, whispers erupted, voices lowered, words quickened. That is Hana Sakamoto, the legend of Tokyo. That is the woman who turned a small import firm into a global empire. That is the millionaire who can bend investors to her will with a single meeting. Some spoke with admiration, some with envy, but none with indifference. She was a figure that demanded conversation even in silence. Yet as the murmurs spread, something unsettling seeped into the air. Her solitude was too stark, her presence too raw. Unlike the others who flaunted entourages, she sat alone. No assistant leaned in with schedules. No translator hovered at her shoulder. She was an island of stillness surrounded by an ocean of noise. The wealthiest woman in the room was also the most isolated. The paradox fascinated the crowd. How could a woman who had conquered the markets of Asia now sit defenseless in New York, without a single ally at her side? How could a woman whispered about in Forbes and Financial Times now clutch a pendant as though it were her only lifeline? How could power look so fragile yet so unbreakable in the same breath? Eyes followed her every move. Some guests tilted their glasses slowly, pretending to drink while watching her with curiosity. Others whispered theories about her business, her rumored losses, her hidden motives for traveling without staff, a few, less kind, smirked quietly as if they had discovered a weakness in a titan. Yet beneath all the speculation was one undeniable truth. Hana Sakamoto had transformed the room without saying a single word. What unsettled them most was not her silence, but what her silence implied. It spoke louder than the piano. It challenged the arrogance of wealth. It forced the privilege to confront something they had forgotten. True power does not need to shout. It does not need translation. It does not even need the approval of a glittering crowd. True power is the ability to remain composed while the world trembles around you. And as Hana sat there, her hands wrapped around that mysterious pendant, her eyes lowered but her presence towering, the drama of the evening was already set in motion. The whispers would soon turn into questions. The questions would soon turn into judgment. And the judgment would soon reveal the truth that money cannot shield anyone from vulnerability. The millionaire from Tokyo had arrived not to flaunt her empire, but to remind everyone of the cost of building one. And before the night was over, the lesson she carried in silence would shake the entire hall to its core. The moment the waiter placed the leather-bound menu in front of her, Hana Sakamoto's calm exterior trembled. Her eyes scanned the words, line after line of English phrases written in ornate script. To the others it was ordinary. To her it was an iron wall. She tilted her head, squinting as though her willpower alone could unlock the code. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to act. She opened her mouth. A sound emerged, soft at first, then struggling. Chicken. Please? Her accent wrapped around the word, dragging it into unfamiliar shapes. The waiter blinked, uncertain. He leaned closer as though proximity could translate meaning. Hana tried again, her voice cracking against the silence. Salmon? A pause. Confusion painted the waiter's face. He looked helplessly at another server. The chain of incomprehension grew. Around the tables, smirks began to bloom. One man whispered behind his napkin. A woman covered her mouth, hiding a laugh that escaped anyway. The cruel amusement spread like perfume through the hall. They had worshipped her the moment she walked in. Now they watched her stumble like a child learning her first words. The waitstaff fumbled. They pointed at dishes on the menu, speaking louder each time. This one, fish. This one, steak. Understand. Their voices rose with each failed attempt, as if shouting could break the barrier. Hana's hands shook. She nodded politely, though she understood nothing. Each nod was a shield against humiliation, but the shield grew thinner with every second. She clutched the pendant at her chest, her only anchor in the storm. Her thumb rubbed the silver until her skin reddened. The faces around her blurred. She could hear the music still, but the piano now sounded mocking. The chandeliers glittered above, but their brilliance burned rather than comforted. Inside her eyes flickered something no one wanted to see. Vulnerability. The Iron Woman of Tokyo, the Empress of Boardrooms, reduced to a whisper of herself because words failed her. The room devoured the sight. Wealth had always made her untouchable. Language stripped her bare. Some guests exchanged uneasy looks. A few turned away, pretending not to notice. But curiosity betrayed them. They stole glances when they thought us safe. Each glance was a knife. Hana felt them pierce her composure. Alone in her corner, she became the spectacle. The staff continued their futile efforts. They gestured toward plates carried past, hoping she would point and settle the matter. But Hannah's pride chained her hand. To simply point like a mute beggar in a place where she was supposed to reign felt like surrender. Her silence deepened. The air thickened with discomfort. The laughter subsided, but the sting of it lingered. It was worse than mockery. It was pity. For a woman who had commanded empires, pity was poison. She lowered her gaze, unable to meet the eyes that fed on her weakness. The clock ticked forward, but each second stretched cruelly long. She wished for escape, wished for someone who could simply hear her. In a city filled with millions, in a room filled with wealth, she was completely alone. She closed her eyes for a moment, summoning the composure that had carried her through decades of battles. But battles fought with contracts and negotiations could not prepare her for this war of words. Power cannot translate itself. Authority cannot erase loneliness. When she opened her eyes again, she saw the waiter still waiting, still desperate to please yet failing completely. She forced a faint smile, the kind that disguises despair. The pendant pressed against her chest seemed to grow heavier, as if demanding that she remember what no one else could know. And then the truth settled like a stone in her heart. At this table, in this glittering hall, she was not the Hana Sakamoto the world admired. She was just a woman stripped of her voice, a stranger in the very city she came to conquer. The whispers had become silence now, but silence was no mercy. It was a spotlight brighter than any chandelier. The hall had transformed into a theater, and she was trapped as the unwilling star of a cruel performance. The drama had shifted. No longer was she the admired legend of Tokyo. Tonight she was the vulnerable exile in New York, surrounded yet abandoned, rich beyond measure yet impoverished in the one currency that mattered most. Words? In the farthest corner of the hall, while the crowd wrestled with their fascination and discomfort at Hana Sakamoto's silence, another pair of eyes had been watching. They did not belong to the wealthy. They did not belong to the powerful. They belonged to a young waitress whose name tag read Mia Johnson. Mia was not meant to be noticed. She was new, only a few weeks into the job, assigned to tasks nobody else wanted, clearing glasses, refilling water, carrying plates too heavy for her small frame. She moved through the glittering dining hall like a shadow, careful never to draw attention. The supervisors barked orders at her, reminding her constantly that she was replaceable. She had learned to keep her head down, to blend into the background, but tonight something pierced that discipline. The sight of Hana struggling with words struck a chord deep within her chest. As the wealthy smirked and the staff faltered, Mia stood frozen, her tray trembling in her hands. Memories came rushing like a flood. She saw not Hana, but her grandmother Sachiko sitting at a wooden kitchen table in a small apartment years ago. Sachiko had lived in America for decades, yet English had always been her barrier. Her tongue stumbled. Her sentences collapsed. In grocery stores, in doctors' offices, even at family gatherings, she carried the weight of being unheard. It was Mia, as a little girl, who would step in. She would take her grandmother's hand and speak the words that bridged the gap. At first, she had done it out of love, then out of duty, and eventually it became second nature. As classmates teased her for learning a language no one cared about, Mia kept her secret skill close. Japanese was her inheritance, her quiet rebellion, her hidden strength. She rarely used it outside her family. By the time she grew older, it felt like a private world that belonged only to her and Sachiko. Now that hidden world came alive again in the middle of a 5-star restaurant. Watching Hana clutch her pendant, watching her face twist with silent humiliation, Mia felt the weight of her grandmother's voice echo inside her. It was the same helplessness, the same isolation, the same quiet plea for someone to simply understand. Her heart pounded. She glanced at her supervisor near the bar. His stern eyes scanned the room, his lips pressed in irritation as the spectacle unfolded at Hannah's table. This was not Mia's assignment. She had no permission to intervene, but something stronger than rules pulled her forward. She shifted the tray from her hands onto a nearby counter. Her palms were damp. She wiped them on her apron, her breaths quick and shallow. Every step she imagined taking felt like a betrayal of her role. Yet every second she hesitated deepened the shame at Hana's table. The room was devouring the woman with silence and pity. Mia could no longer stand back. She thought of Sachiko again, the nights when her grandmother would weep quietly because she could not make herself understood at the pharmacy or the bank. She remembered the trembling in her grandmother's voice when she whispered, "Thank you. Mia, you are my bridge." The phrase burned into her soul. And tonight, she knew Hana needed that bridge too. Mia inhaled sharply. The clamor of the restaurant seemed to fade. She stepped forward, her shoes clicking softly against the polished floor. The glittering crowd barely noticed her at first, too absorbed in their quiet judgment of Hana. But when Mia began to approach the table, heads began to turn. The wealthy diners saw her plain uniform, the messy ponytail, the nervous determination etched into her face. She did not belong in the spotlight. Yet her presence carried a force none of them expected. She was walking into the center of a storm, armed with nothing but a language buried inside her memory. The supervisor's glare caught her in mid-step. His lips parted in warning, but she did not stop. Something more powerful than fear drove her now. This was not about a job. This was not about protocol. This was about dignity. As she drew closer, Hana lifted her eyes, still clouded with helplessness. For the briefest moment, their gazes locked. Hana saw not a stranger, but something unspoken flickering behind those young eyes. Mia felt her grandmother's presence in that instant, as if Sachiko herself were guiding her forward. The hall, unaware of what was about to unfold, hushed itself. Every sound seemed to bow to the tension of the moment. A young waitress, invisible until now, was about to shatter the cruelty of the evening with the one gift no one expected. Her voice, Mia Johnson felt every heartbeat slam against her ribs as she stepped closer to the table. The polished floor reflected her shoes. each click louder than the piano that once filled the room. Mr. Collins, her supervisor, caught sight of her. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened. The message in his glare was clear. Do not interfere. Do not cross that line. Yet Mia kept moving. She could feel the invisible barrier of rules and fear stretching thin around her, threatening to snap, but something stronger than obedience carried her forward. The guest noticed first with curiosity, then with confusion. Why would this young waitress, plain in her uniform and trembling slightly, approach the most powerful woman in the room without being summoned? The whispers began again. What was she doing? Who did she think she was? The tension grew sharp, cutting through the laughter that had once mocked Hana's silence. Mia stopped at the edge of the table. Hana Sakamoto sat with her eyes downcast, her hand clutching the pendant as though it was her last defense. For a moment, Mia hesitated. She could hear her grandmother's voice in her memory. Speak, child. Do not let silence defeat you. Her throat tightened, but she lowered herself slightly. In bowing her head toward Hana, in a voice both trembling and certain, she spoke, Konbanwa. Good evening. The sound was soft, yet it struck the air like a thunderclap. The Japanese words sliced through the suffocating silence. Clear and unmistakable, Hana's head snapped up. Her eyes widened. The tears that had been waiting behind her composure finally spilled. For a heartbeat, the entire restaurant froze. Forks hovered mid-air. Glasses stopped before reaching lips. Even the pianist's hands faltered against the keys. All attention locked on the impossible moment unfolding in the corner. The woman who had been trapped in loneliness now stared at the young waitress as if salvation had appeared out of nowhere. Mia repeated herself. Stronger this time? Konbanwa. Hana-sama. Respect laced her tone. Careful and reverent. Hana's lips parted. A soft gasp escaped her before it bloomed into something even rarer. A smile. It was not the polished smile of a business icon, but the pure relief of a soul finally understood. Her shoulders, tense with hours of frustration, lowered. Her trembling hands steadied. The pendant still rested against her chest. But now it was no longer her only anchor. The room could not believe what it witnessed. The same people who had whispered with ridicule now leaned forward, stunned. Wealth had not saved Hana. Status had not rescued her. But the simplest gift of words in her own tongue shattered the walls around her. The transformation was breathtaking. A moment ago, she had been broken. Now she radiated with life. Hana's voice returned in a rush, fluent and graceful. She spoke rapidly, almost desperately, as if all the silence she had endured must be undone in a single breath. Mia listened, nodding, responding with ease. The two women conversed as if no one else existed. Their words flowed like a river that had been dammed too long and had finally burst free. Gasps rippled through the diners. Some pressed hands to their mouths, ashamed of their earlier laughter. Others watched with awe, recognizing the raw power of connection. Mr. Collins still glared from the distance, his authority challenged, but even he could not deny the miracle unfolding. The hierarchy of the restaurant had been rewritten in an instant by a girl who dared to speak. Hana reached across the table, her fingers, once trembling, now clasped Mia's hand with unexpected strength. Tears streaked down her cheeks as she whispered gratitude in Japanese, words only Mia could fully understand. You see me? You hear me? Arigato. The chandelier glittered above, but it was no longer the brightest thing in the hall. That honor belonged to the bond between the millionaire who had everything yet nothing, and the young waitress who had nothing yet everything. The room, silenced by awe, understood what it had just witnessed. Power had shifted. The evening's drama was no longer about wealth or ridicule. It was about the courage to speak and the grace of being heard. And in that moment, the legend of Hana Sakamoto was reborn, not through fortune, but through the simple kindness of a single word. The first words had broken the silence, but what followed carried the true miracle. Mia did not falter. Once she heard Hana respond in her native tongue, her voice steadied and her confidence surged. The dam inside her heart burst open, and suddenly she was no longer the nervous waitress sneaking beyond her duty. She was the bridge her grandmother once told her she was born to be. Hana leaned forward, her eyes glistening with relief. She spoke rapidly, her Japanese flowing like music. The weight of hours of humiliation slid off her shoulders. Each sentence reclaimed a piece of dignity. Each word built a shield around her soul. For the first time that night, she was not drowning. She was breathing again. Mia answered with poise, her phrases smooth, respectful, and careful. She listened intently, then turned to the waiter who still stood stiff and confused. In calm English, she translated Hannah's requests with precision. She would like the salmon with vegetables. She would also like green tea, very hot. The waiter scrambled to note the order, his eyes darting between them, astonished. The transformation spread through the room like wildfire. Diners who had once sneered now leaned closer. Caught between disbelief and admiration, they watched as the once broken woman now sat straighter, her back proud, her voice rising in steady rhythm. Hana was not the victim of the evening anymore. She was Hana Sakamoto, the legend reborn before their eyes. As Mia guided her through the menu, Hana laughed softly, her smile radiant. She pressed her hand against the pendant, but this time it was not desperation. It was gratitude. Her voice carried warmth instead of fear. The sparkle in her eyes reminded the room of a truth wealth had almost buried. Human connection can restore what riches cannot. The piano player, sensing the change, shifted his melody to something lighter. Brighter? The chandeliers seemed to shine in celebration, not mockery. The air that had been thick with judgment now rippled with reverence. Every diner felt the gravity of the moment. They were witnessing not a transaction of service, but a rescue. Mia remained close, careful but strong. She checked on Hana's comfort, explained the dishes, and reassured her with every nod. Hana responded with stories, small glimpses of her journey, her company, her struggles to be heard in foreign lands. Mia listened as though every word was gold. To Hana, that listening was more valuable than any investment contract she had ever signed. The whisper shifted from ridicule to wonder. That girl speaks Japanese. She saved her. Do you see Hannah's smile? The same mouths that had mocked now trembled with humility. Their gazes followed Mia, the unnoticed waitress who had become the quiet heroine of the night. Hana's composure returned fully. She straightened her shoulders, her voice steady, her presence once again commanding. Yet this time the authority did not come from her wealth. It came from the simple joy of being understood. Her laughter rolled through the hall, delicate yet powerful, and it silenced every last shadow of mockery. And when the meal arrived, Hana thanked Mia in Japanese, her words drenched in sincerity. You have given me back my voice. Mia bowed slightly, her chest tight with emotion. She felt her grandmother's spirit there at the table. Watching with pride, she realized the power she had carried all along, hidden until this night forced it into light. The spectacle was unforgettable. A millionaire's empire could not shield her from isolation, but a single waitress could. A fortune could not buy dignity, but kindness could return it in an instant. The diners would leave with full stomachs, but what they would carry in their memories was this lesson carved before their eyes. The bond between Hana and Mia glowed brighter than the chandeliers. Two women from different worlds, one seasoned with decades of battles, the other just beginning her journey, had met on common ground. It was not money. It was not status. It was humanity. As Hana sipped her tea and smiled again, the hall finally exhaled. The drama had reached its turn. The broken had been restored, the forgotten had risen, and the entire restaurant had been transformed into a witness of something divine. The hall had changed. It was no longer the glittering playground of the rich. It had become a silent cathedral of humility. Every guest who had mocked, who had laughed, who had whispered with disdain now sat frozen in awe. Their eyes no longer carried superiority. They carried shame and revelation. They had watched a woman of wealth stripped of dignity, and they had been complicit in her humiliation. Yet they had also witnessed her resurrection, not by gold, not by status, but by the simple courage of a girl in a plain uniform. The lesson burned itself into their hearts. Kindness is stronger than power. Empathy is richer than fortune. Mr. Collins stood near the bar, his arms once crossed in judgment. For most of the night his eyes had followed Mia with irritation, measuring her mistakes, ready to scold. But now his gaze was different. The cold weight of authority had melted into reluctant respect. He had seen something no training manual could teach, something no rule could enforce. A waitress had done what the entire staff and all the wealth in the room could not. She had saved dignity itself. Hana reached across the table once more. Her hand, still trembling but steady with purpose, closed around Mia's. The room leaned forward. It was not the clasp of a customer thanking a server. It was the grasp of one soul acknowledging another. Her words flowed softly in Japanese, but their meaning was clear to all, even if they did not understand. Gratitude that transcended language. Gratitude that carried tears. Arigato, Hana whispered. Thank you. Mia bowed her head, her eyes brimming. She did not speak. She did not need to. The silence that followed was not the silence of ridicule anymore. It was reverence, the kind that rises only when human hearts recognize truth. In that moment, the hierarchy of wealth collapsed. The glitter of chandeliers, the sparkle of diamonds, the arrogance of privilege all paled beside the quiet fire of compassion. The room understood. What endures is not the empire one builds, but the love one shares. Weeks passed, and the memory of that night still clung to Mia like a second skin. She returned to her shifts, carrying trays, cleaning tables, always wondering if anyone else had felt the power she felt in that moment. Then one morning, as the restaurant prepared for another long day, the manager handed her an envelope. It was addressed by hand, the script flowing and elegant, unmistakably Japanese. Her breath caught. She tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a folded letter written entirely in Japanese characters. Her eyes raced across the lines, and her chest tightened as she read. It was from Hana Sakamoto. The words poured with warmth and gratitude. Hana spoke of that evening, of the rescue, of the courage Mia had shown, and then came the shock. Hana invited her to a prestigious Cultural Foundation event in the city. She did not want Mia there as a server. She wanted her as an honored guest. But the letter carried more. Tucked inside was another document, stamped and formal, a scholarship, full support for her education in languages, enough to carry her through college without fear of debt or sacrifice. Hana had learned of Mia's dreams, her quiet struggles, the nights she studied with exhaustion after work, and she had decided that such a gift of spirit deserved a gift of opportunity. Mia collapsed into a chair, the letter trembling in her hands. Tears spilled freely as she whispered the words aloud. She believes in me. For so long, she had been invisible, a shadow in the halls of wealth. Now she was seen. Now she was chosen. The staff watched in confusion, then in awe, as Mia held the letter to her chest. Her life had shifted in a single night of courage, and now the proof was written in ink. A door she never imagined had opened, and through it stretched a future built not on chance, but on the kindness she had dared to give. Years later, the world would know Mia Johnson not as a quiet waitress, but as a voice that crossed borders. She became a professional interpreter, standing on stages, sitting in conference halls, bridging worlds that once stared at each other in silence. Her skill was remarkable, but it was not her fluency alone that captivated those who heard her. It was the fire behind her words, the compassion woven into every translation, the understanding that every phrase carried not just a meaning, but dignity. She traveled across continents, lending her voice to leaders, artists, teachers, and families. From bustling capitals to remote villages, she stood as proof that language is more than sound. It is connection, and every time she spoke, she remembered the night in New York when her courage had first ignited. Hana Sakamoto remained in her memory like a guardian spirit, the image of the powerful woman clutching a pendant in despair, then smiling through tears when finally understood, became Mia's compass. It was not simply a story of wealth and silence. It was a revelation. That night had branded her with a truth the world often forgets. No empire, no fortune, no crown of status can replace the healing touch of empathy. Money can buy chandeliers, but it cannot buy the light of human kindness. Money can rent applause, but it cannot summon the silence of reverence. Money can fill a hall, but it cannot fill a soul. Mia knew this each time she took the stage. Each time her words unlocked another barrier. She carried Hana's gratitude like a hidden jewel, shining whenever she closed her eyes. The world saw her professionalism, her poise, her remarkable gift, but what truly defined her was the legacy of that single act of courage in a restaurant that had once mocked and then fallen silent. In quiet moments, Mia would whisper to herself what Hana had shown her. True power is not dominance. It is compassion. True wealth is not measured in accounts. It is measured in the love we give and the dignity we restore. And so the story lived on. A millionaire who discovered vulnerability, a waitress who found her voice, and a room full of strangers who learned a lesson greater than any transaction. The night of chandeliers became more than a dinner. It became a testimony. If the world remembers Hana Sakamoto for her empire, Mia remembers her for something greater. She remembers her tears, her smile, and her final whisper of gratitude. That whisper echoed into Mia's life, shaping her destiny. And the message endures. Money may open doors, but only kindness opens hearts. Wealth may rule cities, but only understanding rules souls. In the end, what people carry is not how much we own, but how much we care. From a silent millionaire to a young waitress's courage. The story proves kindness is the greatest power. If this touched your heart, please share, and subscribe for more unforgettable true-to-life stories.